Good. Good afternoon. My name is Kenny Gold. I'm NYSCOPBA's Western Region Vice President. Before we start, I wanted to thank and introduce a couple of our special guests today, Senator Tom Elmira, Assemblyman Chris Friend, as well as Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. We're here today due to the recent violence since April 1st, since the HALT Act has been enacted in our correctional facilities. Here specifically at Elmira, over a 2-week period alone, 6 officers and a sergeant were assaulted, as well as a female officer being thrown on, as well, not only the officers and the sergeants getting assaulted, gas had to be deployed just to stop inmates from slashing each other. Before you get into even the violence, HALT has created more problems than HALT has created a staffing issue, a staffing crisis as well. People are being mandated left and right. You see signs behind us. They're overworked and understaffed. They're not going home. They're not seeing their families. This is crucial times with their loved ones that they're missing daily with no end in sight. They're beat down left and right. You see these men and women behind these walls and fences. You go and you talk to them. There's no reprieve. Mandatory overtime is not something that everybody thinks you signed up for. It's not right. The legislators that supported this act, they did not speak to anybody. You'll hear from President Powers later. Nobody, any of the frontline staff, anybody that walks through the walls and fences, never had a conversation with nobody to see how it would affect them. The legislators that supported this act have an obligation to us as well, to the men and women, not just the incarcerated individuals that live behind these fences. They did a horrible job, and Senator Elmira is going to come up and speak on some of that right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here with us today. I'm proud today to stand with the men and women of the New York State Department of Corrections and their union, NYSCOPBA, today to bring light to a very concerning issue that's taking place behind our prison walls, that's affecting the lives and safety of those that work in our prisons to keep us safe on the streets. We hear news almost nightly about the increase in violent crime in our communities and in our neighborhoods, and the results of one-party rule in Albany that has been coddling criminals for 4 years now. It's not just bail reform that you hear about most. That's a big part of it. It's about parole reform. In the last decade, the rate of parolees getting out has more than doubled, sending inmates back into our streets. The Raise the Age has taken serious criminals that are 16 and 17 years old, committing adult crimes, treating them in family court with kid gloves. Those 16 and 17-year-olds are being used as pawns by gangs across New York State. We hear about the violence in our prisons, particularly here in Elmira, nearly every week about another assault, whether it's inmate on inmate or inmates on staff. Right now, under legislation that was put into effect by one-party rule in Albany, went into effect April 1st of this year, called the HALT legislation. That eviscerated the Department of Corrections' ability to discipline inmates that commit even violent crimes within the prison walls, whether they're assaults and attacks on other inmates or attacks on correction officers or other staff in the prison. They have limited drastically the amount of time an inmate can spend in solitary confinement to 15 days maximum. But even during that period, even on their first day after a violent crime violation, they're out of their cell and with other inmates for hours throughout a day. We have no effective discipline system in the Department of Corrections now as a result of HALT. And it is the one-party rule of coddling criminals that is allowing this to happen. The whole attitude of defund the police. It's coddling criminals at every aspect and every level of our criminal justice system. Part of our criminal justice system is punishment. Like it or not, punishment is a part of our criminal justice system. And those that are the most unruly and disruptive of inmates behind our prison walls need to be disciplined. Our correction staff needs to have the ability to have some discipline to maintain some semblance of law and order behind the prison walls. Our inmates our prisons are further understaffed. Talk to any correction officer you run into about their schedule. They're routinely being required to work double shifts. They're routinely being denied their day off, sometimes both regular days off during the week, and working around the clock. It's an unsafe working condition for our correction officers. It's like a powder keg in every one of our prisons waiting to go off with the violence that's going on with no repercussions to the worst of the worst inmates behind these walls. You know, yesterday I toured with Assemblyman Palmisano and Senator Pam Helming. We toured 5 Points Correctional Facility up in Seneca County. It is just chaos behind these walls with what these inmates are getting away with and what the correction officers can do about it, which is virtually nothing. The inmates clearly are running the asylum here. It's not safe, and we need to put a stop to it. HALT needs to be repealed. Since it was put in place starting April 1st, there's been a significant increase in violent crimes of assaults on other inmates and assaults on staff. Year to date, assaults on staff are up 23%. Year to date, inmate on inmate assaults are up 28%. These men and women of the Department of Corrections are getting beat up on a regular basis. It's not safe. And these criminals that are continuing to commit these crimes behind the walls of the prison need to be disciplined. And the Corrections Department has to have the ability to maintain some law and order in our prisons that's clearly not taking place right now because of the one-party rule in Albany that continues to coddle criminals at every aspect of our criminal justice system. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. Next speaker is going to be Assemblyman Chris Friend.
Just want to take the time to thank the media for coming here today and taking the opportunity to be educated on this issue, and also going ahead and making this public to the rest of our community, because not everyone's aware of actually what's happening behind the walls in our corrections facilities. And this affects everybody across New York State. I also want to take the opportunity to personally thank all the correction officers and staff for doing the jobs that they do to keep us safe and to keep the inmates safe. Unfortunately, the New York Democrats have a different idea of who has more rights. As we've seen recently, the immigrants, illegal immigrants, I should say, that are coming across the southern border and being bused to New York City are receiving more rights and more protections than our correction officers and those inmates that are behind those walls. And that's not right. Everybody here is a citizen of New York State. They should receive top priority, not somebody that's illegally coming across the southern border and being trucked in, bussed in to our community that we have no idea who they are, where they're from. And they're not just coming from Mexico. They've reported over 168 countries that individuals are coming from. So this is just, again, the wrong priorities. And this is a continual operation that the Democrats have had. When Governor Cuomo was first elected, he shut down Monterey Shock. Now, when I was raised, I believed that corrections was the idea to bring somebody into prison to reform the way that they're behaving. Monterey Shock did that. Monterey Shock gave those inmates the opportunity to break their drug addictions, to get an education, and to be a productive citizen in society. Mothers and fathers and families came during the closing of Monterey Shock and pleaded with the governor and the legislature to keep Monterey Shock open. And not only to keep it open, but to expand that program, because that's exactly what we're looking for from our corrections facilities. It had a 93% success rate. Now, why would you shut something down that has a 93% success rate that's clearly working? Because the Democrats believe that that was unjust. They believe that it was unjust to take people away from their communities, and they put the Closer to Home initiative into effect. Well, what have we seen from the Closer to Home initiative? Just the opposite results. More people are going back to the gangs that they grew up in, and they're not being reformed. They're not seeing a way to live a productive life. And that's not what we should be doing in this state. And now, under Governor Hochul, we have the HALT Act. And like Senator Elmira mentioned, we've seen a massive increase on violence on inmate and inmate on correction officers since that's been put in place. And it disturbs me every time I either pick up the phone and hear from a correction officer, see them at the gym, see them in the community, or receive that email talking about what's happened in one of our prisons across the state. Because it's just not what should be happening. They recently just shut down Southside Correctional Facility. The state had spent $20 million rehabbing that. Meant nothing to them. 300 officers lost their jobs or relocated across the state. And that facility could have been used to prevent some of these violent attacks from occurring. Even if you weren't going to use it as a solitary confinement facility, you still could use it as the opportunity to spread out the inmates, reduce their double bunking, and prevent gang members, because that's another one that, again, from the public growing up in New York State, I had no idea about that. I grew up here in Big Flats. I didn't grow up in New York City. I had no idea how these rival gangs interact with each other. They notice it either by a tattoo, a haircut, but they know when they're in the same facility as another rival gang member. And as soon as they see them, they're going to be plotting a way to take out that gang member or cause them violent harm. And if we'd kept Southside open, again, you could have been spreading out those gang members and given that opportunity instead of putting more burden on our corrections staff to try to figure out how to run those logistics of spreading individuals out and keeping them safe so they have the opportunity to come through the system and be rehabilitated. One thing I forgot about Monterey Shock, when that was closed down, Monterey Shock is a minimum security facility. We're standing in front of a maximum security facility. What did they do with those inmates from Monterey Shock when they shut it down? They took those minimum security prisoners and sent them over here in general housing with maximum security individuals. What do you think happened? Those minimum security individuals who had an opportunity, 93% success opportunity to be rehabilitated and become productive citizens, were sent here and mixed with a violent criminal. And nobody in this facility is convicted of what they actually, or are serving a sentence for what they actually did. That's not the way our legal system works. Everybody's convicted of a lesser offense. So these minimum security individuals go in here and they're immediately threatened. Maybe not them personally, but they're threatened because their families will be threatened that if you don't bring in the drugs for us, you don't bring in certain materials for us, then we're going to go after your family members back home because we have access to them. We're in the middle of campaign season. We have an election coming up in November. If you really want to make a difference, You have to end one-party rule in Albany. You need to elect Congressman Zeldin and the Zeldin-Esposito ticket and put somebody in office who's actually going to pay attention to what's happening behind these walls and do what's right for our citizens and our communities. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Assemblyman Phil Palmisano is going to speak now.
Thank you, Kenny. Repeal HALT. Stop rewarding violence. Start protecting staff. That is a key message we're talking about here today. We're talking about across the state. I want to say thank you to Kenny for the introduction. President Powers for being here today, for your leadership, for the individuals behind me, the brave men and women working on the Hill and the facility behind us, and working across this state. We know that there's a public safety crisis in our communities across this state because of the failed policies of this administration and one-party rule in Albany. Bail reform, the catch and release program, raise the age, parole reform that continues to release dangerous criminals, murderers, rapists back onto the street, an unchecked parole board, which is releasing cop killers, child rapers, and murderers back onto the street. What the public doesn't realize, we realize that there's this public safety crisis going on in our communities because it's in the newspaper. But what the public doesn't know, in the walls behind us and in walls across the state, we have a crisis and an emergency inside our correctional facilities. All the cars driving by here today have no idea what's going on in these walls unless they're married to or have family members that are working here. It's part of the policies that we continue to see, from the closures to not providing the tools and resources like the secure vendor program and drug dogs and providing the resources, but yet then taking away critical resources, disciplinary tools. HALT, what that did was basically took away an important disciplinary tool to segregate into special housing units dangerous and violent criminals, disruptive criminals inside the facility. There's no incentive or deterrent for them to act properly and behave because they know they only have to do 15 days and then they're going to be back out and cause more violence and danger for those individuals. The whole purpose to segregate dangerous individuals is to protect our staff and to protect the inmates that are inside these facilities. As President Powers will mention, 2 individuals have been murdered inmates have been murdered inside these facilities this year. Governor Hochul and the Democratic one-party rule majority in Albany has failed our corrections officers and our correctional staff and their families. The staff are burned out with the mandated overtime, not being able to see their family, not providing enough staff, not providing enough resources, dealing with record assaults, and the levels are rising dramatically. And what we see is more and more of our corrections officers and staff leaving and retiring and saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to put up with this anymore if I can't see my family, if my health and well-being is jeopardized. Just a few statistics from here, just here in Elmira Correctional Facility behind us that we were shared. Some of the incidents that have happened here. On Wednesday, August 3rd, in this facility, an inmate was slashed in the face with an unknown weapon by another inmate in the field house. Staff gave orders to the attackers to stop, but those orders were ignored. On Saturday, July 30th, a female officer had liquid thrown on her that smelled of urine and feces. On Saturday, July 23rd, an officer was attacked in the face by an inmate returning to his cell. To everyone at home, this is just an example of the continued violence that's happening in this facility behind us, but not just here, in our facilities across the state. Let me share some staggering statistics that our staff was to put together that I think really shows what's going on. In 2010, our correctional facilities had 57,000 total population inmate. Inmate on staff assaults in 2010 was 577. Ending 2021, inmate on staff assaults with a population of 32,000 inmates, rose to 1,177. That's a 103% increase since 2010, but yet 25,000 less inmates. Why? Where is the help from the administration to take action and provide that help and the resources they need? We got the worst of the worst inside our facilities, and what the administration and the Democratic majorities, the one HALT party rule, is doing is taking away critical resources and not providing the resources they need to be safe and to do their job and protect the other inmates who are there that actually want to do their time and get out. It's just a pattern and policies that we continue to see. And since the implementation of HALT, as President Powers will talk about, we've seen a dramatic spike just since April 1st, over a 30% increase in inmate on staff assaults. And the numbers on inmate assaults are just as equal, staggering numbers there as well. It's just the policies that we continue to see, the coddling of the criminals at the expense of our dedicated, brave men and women who are working a very dangerous job to keep us safe. Governor Hochul recently just extended the emergency for COVID and declared an emergency for monkeypox. But when it comes to what's going inside our correctional facilities, it seems like their head is in the sand. They should be declaring an emergency. She should be declaring an emergency inside our correctional facilities. That would empower her to suspend HALT. We need to repeal HALT, but if she declares an emergency, she could suspend HALT. Revisit this issue. Maybe talk to the corrections officers and those who are being hurt and threatened each and every day to give them a chance. There's more discipline to our officers working inside our facilities to be safe during incidents than those criminals and inmates who are attacking and hurting our staff inside the facilities and other inmates. It's wrong. It's time to act. Enough is enough. It's time for this administration to lead and stop putting their head in the sand when it comes to what's going inside our correctional facilities. It's time to repeal HALT. It's time to start treating with respect and dignity, the dignity they deserve, that our brave men and women working inside our facilities are essential workers. They are our essential workers. What are we saying to them if we treat them like this, not give them the tools and resources they need, not provide them days off, mandated overtime over and over again, and not adding staff to the facilities so they can have that time and have that respite? It's unfortunate that we continue to see this happening. We have to act now. We have to act now, and we have to show them, our corrections officers and our staff, that we have their back like we know they have our back. I did want to say to all of you here today, thank you. Thank you for what you and your men and women in your organization do for us each and every day. We know that you aren't being shown the gratitude and respect and appreciation you deserve. I just hope you know Senator Elmira, myself, Assemblyman Friend, and many of us throughout the state will continue to fight for you, continue to speak up for you, because it's the right thing to do. And we know you are doing a dangerous job each and every day to keep us safe. You leave for work and you don't know what's going to happen. If you're going to get slashed, if you're going to have feces or urine thrown at you, or if someone's going to attack you with something. That's what these brave men and women face each and every day when they go into these facilities. But yet, this administration, the department, the one HALT party rule in Albany is not supporting them the way they need to be supported. It's long past due that we show our brave men and women inside our facilities that we have their back, that we respect them, and will treat them with the dignity they deserve. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Our last speaker is going to be NYSCOPBA President Michael Powers.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, members of the media, for being here today. Thank you to Assemblyman Chris Friend, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, Senator Tom Elmira. We're grateful for their support. We acknowledge their support and all the words that they said. Much of what, pretty much everything is accurate. The beauty of our relationships are that we can share our information with them. They understand it. They ask the pertinent questions related to the issues that stand behind us in this facility behind us. One of the most active facilities in the state in the last current years. I can't count how many lockdowns they've had within the last year, and all due to security measures, and rightfully so. So the fine staff at Elmira and every other facility that we have in the facility in the state should be highly recognized, and we feel that we're not getting that. Basically, the HALT Act has done nothing to improve the lives of the people who reside in the New York State correctional facilities. In fact, it's done completely the opposite. HALT severely limits and in some cases eliminates the ability to remove and separate dangerous individuals from general population for any meaningful amount of time. These violent individuals know this all too well and take full advantage of this poorly thought out law. Our prisons are more dangerous today than they've ever been. You've heard the references related to the numbers in violent acts towards staff and towards inmates from 2010 to current date, with a much higher inmate population compared to today. And that basically tells us that everybody behind those walls are potentially bad people. And we're charged to deal with that. Your coaches, the correction officers in our communities are coaches. They're volunteer firefighters, they're pastors, they hold many roles inside their communities, and they haven't been able to uphold that as of late, basically due to the fact that they've had to come into these facilities and work tirelessly on behalf of the state and their employer due to the fact that they simply don't have the resources. HALT was enacted through legislation that was egregiously acted upon, and more importantly, had no input from the shareholders, had no input from the agency. It was an agenda item for a hand-picked set of legislators that have ultimately came through, and it came to fruition, was signed into law by former Governor Cuomo, and now we're dealing with it. And those dealings are coming with heavy, heavy consequences. Assemblyman Palmisano made mention of many of the assaults that are occurring towards many of our members throughout our state. Ignoring the violence doesn't make it go away. And HALT has had such an impact on our membership, our NYSCOPBA membership, that it's directly affected their lives, their personal lives, their quality of life, their family lives, their personal lives, their mental and physical, emotional stress that they're dealing with is significant, and it's going unheard. We'll preach it until we finally get our say, and we'll continue to preach that. But ignoring the violence doesn't make it go away. The stats are simple since HALT's been enacted since April 1st. 4 full months of data. Attacks on staff are up nearly 40%, 38%. Assaults on staff. Assaults on other incarcerated individuals up 33% since April 1. That's taking 3 months out of the calendar year for the numbers that far exceed any numbers in previous years. Assemblyman Palmisano made mention of 1,134 assaults on staff last year. We're on record to blow that out of the water. That's a record we don't want to have. We don't want to have that record. 2 people have been murdered inside our correctional facilities. Incarcerated individuals have murdered and killed another incarcerated individual in our correctional facilities since April 1st. We've had 2 homicides in the last 4 years in the prison system. What's that tell you? This law is garbage. It doesn't work. We've had no input from the people that brought it forward. They have yet to come into any of our facilities to see how this is rolling out, and none of that's occurring now. We're having issues as we speak. I can guarantee it. Somewhere within this state, from a proponent of this law. Our goal is to educate those who reside on the other side of the aisle, those who crafted and supported this legislation, of the true impact of HALT. Because of this, in its current form, it's unsustainable and dangerous. We've recently come across a comment made by a co-sponsor of the legislation out of New York City, who basically egregiously commented related to the assaults through one of our media events. On behalf of the members of NYSCOPBA, we're offended by his comments, where he exaggerated the types of assault that are occurring to many of our members, where he's downplaying the assaults and suggesting that we're cooking the numbers. These numbers that we provided to you, these statistics, are on the DOC's website. These are the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision numbers. The numbers that get reported out of this facility and the 43 other facilities within the state of New York. That's where those numbers come from. And for that politician, who is the former chair of the Corrections Committee for the New York State Senate, not to understand that and make an ignorant comment offends each and every correction officer in this state of New York.